evening and welcome to the Thai PBS World. Campaigning on road safety is quite essential for many countries in Southeast Asia, especially for Thailand and the Philippines, in which the deaths from road safety are quite high in the region. And to what extent the two countries can learn from Switzerland, which is regarded as champion in terms of road safety, in order to pursue sustainable transport. Switzerland is one among the global top in terms of road safety. The country has clear regulations and strict law enforcement. For example, on speed limit for cars, specific lane for bicycles, and high standard vehicles. Supornwong Chompu, a Thai woman who lives and works in international organization in Switzerland for more than 20 years, relies on public transport in Geneva during the weekdays. She drives to her resort house over the weekend. Suporn is very much aware of speed limit, while her car has a warning system to help her.
I am very much concerned with the speed limit, and for example, like when you, luckily right now I have the car that has the radar control on the display, and for those cars that from the old cars, I just have to beware when I see the sign like 50, 60 or 80 or 100 or up, and so from time to time I made a mistake because you might have been distracted by the other things, so therefore that's how I have to be self-aware.
In a legal workshop on road safety organized by the World Health Organization in Geneva, participants from China, India, the Philippines, Tanzania and Thailand exchange measures of each country on road safety, while an expert in Switzerland has demonstrated how law enforcement is crucial for road safety.
There's very strong regulation in things like wearing motorcycle helmets, not exceeding speed limits, not drink driving. Lots of speed cameras installed around the country which ensure that people keep their speeds low, and we know it's so important to improve safety to reduce speeds. There are 30 km/h speed limits right throughout the city where there are large numbers of pedestrians and cyclists. And the reason for that is that we know when speeds are low in those areas, that dramatically reduces the number of pedestrian and cyclist fatalities. So by looking at each part of the system and introducing those measures, you can start to see dramatic reductions in the number of people being killed and injured. And that's the sort of model that we would certainly advocate is introduced to Thailand.
For the Philippines, the country is facing challenges in phasing out jeepney, a form of public transportation from the Second World War. It is called the king of the road, but this king has caused much air pollution.
The main mode of transportation in the country, aside from buses, is of course jeepney. Jeepneys are a variation of the Second World War jeep used by the Americans during the war, which we converted into public transport. Right now, the jeepneys are still the king of the road, meaning majority are still using jeepney. But we are also in the process of upgrading our transportation system. We will modernize these jeepneys into modern jeepneys that are safer, more economical and environmentally sustainable. Jeepney, as far as safety is concerned, is of course below the required minimum for safety, for not only for the passengers but also for pedestrians. There is minimal to the point of no safety at all for both passengers and pedestrians. We did enact some laws to adopt some safety measures like seatbelt for the driver, but the inherent defect in the design of this jeepney contributes to a number of road crash deaths in the country.
India is another country which faces dramatic air pollution on the roads, especially in big cities like Mumbai and Delhi. However, Pune is a clear example of how busy road can be transformed to a friendly walking street and finally got a sustainable award.
Pune won the Sustainable Award in 2020. So what they've done basically is they've tried to make their pedestrians try to make the streets more pedestrian friendly, and what they followed is basically an all-around concept. So they've redesigned all of the city streets to keeping pedestrians first in mind. So pedestrian first, then cyclists, and then motor vehicles. So they've taken a completely opposite approach of what we've seen in India in other cities. So if you go to, for instance, Delhi or Mumbai, you'd see the roads designed for vehicles, mostly for cars. But if you go to Pune, I think they've completely reversed it to think of the pedestrian first, then the cyclist, then the two-wheeler, then the car, and then the bigger vehicles. So I think it's a great achievement, and I think a lot of it is basically sort of a down-top approach. So the city authorities were quite keen to have that done and try and make the city more pedestrian-friendly and more people-friendly.
To meet with sustainable transport, it is essential for any cities to have a real investment, which have contributing factors for society, economy, and environment. Many capitals have been quite successful, according to an expert from WHO, but real political commitment and clear policies are needed.
In the case, for example, of London or Paris, which are now passing very progressive policies to shift towards sustainable, healthy mobility. The city of Oslo as well is an interesting example. But not to stay only in the developed world, I could also point to several interesting initiatives from developing countries, including the example of Bogota that many of you are familiar with, with heavy investments in the past in public transport and walking and cycling infrastructure, but also more recent examples in the case of Mexico or Dar el Salaam, which is now investing massively in public transport. So there are many examples across the globe that we can point to. Of course, there's not a one-size-fits-all. Every context is specific and its own, and that is why I reinforce my point made previously. It is very important that we enable the local authority to look at its own context and what works at the local level for that particular area.
So often the argument will be that the examples of countries that have really dramatically reduced the number of deaths and injuries on the road are because they're high-income countries. And in part that's true, but Switzerland, in the same way as the Netherlands and Sweden, came from those very high levels of deaths and injuries themselves in the 1970s. And it's through introducing measures such as compulsory breath testing, speed cameras, good infrastructure, safe vehicles, that have seen the deaths reduce and their incomes rise. So at the moment, if you think about the amount of money having to be spent in Thailand on health care, rehabilitation, lost productivity because of people being seriously injured and being unable to work, if decisions are made to reduce the number of casualties, that will add to the financial wealth of the country, which increases its ability to invest in hospitals and schools and more road safety intervention. So it's really a chicken and egg thing. Investment in road safety brings economic benefit and prosperity.
There has to be a beginning point for sustainable transport, and it is better to be late than never for sustainable development of the global society. And that's all from ThaiPBS World tonight.